So here we are. I just wanted to show you guys all the progress that I've made on my wedding dress. This is what my wedding dress looks like currently. It's kind of frumpy looking right here because I had to hand sew a few parts. And right here, it doesn't have the right booby shape because of my fake boobs. Anyways, so what I'm going to be doing now is making the skirt part overlay that goes on top of it, and then I will be embellishing on top of it and cutting out the parts that I do not like. Like this was supposed to be like this deep and it wasn't. So that makes me really upset. So I'm gonna go back and work on it and fix out these kinks. Now, because I cut this at a weird angle and this was not a pattern that actually fits me, I'm just gonna have to hide it a lot with a lot of embellishments. And of course, you know, I am going to be using another fabric for a train that goes on top. This way it becomes detachable. So it's going to be like a multi-layered like dress, kind of like, think of it like a macaroon. Looking at it now, and there's this top part here, and then this kind of just like rises up, and then this just looks so cool right here. Like this bottom piece, and then if I was to extend it, it just doesn't look right. So I don't know, I'm so torn between like just cutting off this bottom edge and not making it the scallop edge, but then I can keep all this part here as extra to go on top of my outfit itself. So I mean, a lot of it's going to go into the skirt anyways. I just want to make sure that the pattern looks nice. If I cut this and I screw up, there's no going back. So good luck to me! What I decided to do was actually use the larger scallop edge instead of the bottom edge. Now I'm folding over the fabric and I'm going to cut out the actual pattern on top of it. This way I have a lot of space, and that way I'm going to maximize as much fabric as possible. I'm only cutting up to my waistband because my bodice is going to be a little bit different. I decided to remove the entire bottom part, so that way I can just cut it off really easy. And this way I can just fold it and go. Versus the first time of having to like go around and cut this bottom part. So now I have my lace edging that I really want. Let's get to cutting! I want to mention something extremely important. So the lace here that we cut, it has these beads at the edge, and we still need to sew this edge to the other pieces. So what you have to do is remove your beads and take them off. And then make sure you have the string on the inside if you are working with like a beaded material. And then remove the string on the inside and then go ahead and sew it down. Once you have sewed it down, go ahead and then cut these tiny little tassels off because you don't want any of the other beads falling off during your wedding day. I am going to go back with some of the beads that I have, such as these here, and I'm going to sew them back on in different places to give a little bit of bling. When I was cutting, a lot fell off the fabric, so I definitely want to put those back on without having to buy more. So I just want to show you that I went ahead and sewed down most of the dress itself, and then I'm going to be pinning it to the dress. It doesn't have all the pieces, so I'm going to have to go back and alter some spots. But let's see. Yeah, this is the front, and it will wrap around. So it'll look really cool. I'm really excited to see how this will play out, and I still have a lot of extra lace pieces that I can use to sew on top of the mesh and still go down the arms like I had originally planned. So let's go ahead and finish sewing this, and then we can tack it down to the dress itself. Alright, just because my husband is in the other room doesn't mean he's allowed in this room, so you can hear him singing. But we are currently sewing on the skirt. I'm going to be sewing it more on this part than the netting here, only because the netting here is going to get covered a butt ton with all of the scrap pieces of lace. So you can see it here, and with any of the beads that fall off, like I said before, I'm actually going to be using that on top of the lace when we put the dimension here, so it'll look really nice. This is coming along really pretty, and I know it looks really funny and you can see a little bit of the puckering. That's going to disappear. I just really didn't want to do it the correct way, apparently. Alright, so let's go ahead and fast forward me sewing this down. Woo. A long process in the making, but I want to show you what it looks like now. So I went ahead and added the lace like we did just a second ago, you know? And now it's attached to the dress. But now, as you know with corsets, and if you make a dress, there's going to be this gap from each side. And in order to make this smaller, we're going to use some elastic, but first we're going to sew this together here at the pretty part. I'm going to make a casing on top of it, probably using a white ribbon, and then I'm going to feed a small bit of elastic through. This way I can get in and out of the dress easier. So far, this is what it looks like. This is my wedding dress so far, and I'm loving it. So I'm going to go ahead and just quick baste stitch and cut off the netting here that I do not need, and then add it. In previous videos, I've shown you how to work with horsehair braid. This time, I'm using a very thick and wide horsehair braid, or crinoline as you call it. This is going to help keep some of the shape of the skirt itself. I'm going to be pinning it the same way that I do with all the other types. I'm going to pin it down on the right side of the fabric and then continue all the way around the hemline. Make sure you have enough crinoline to go all the way around your hem. If you don't, you might want to stop, wait, and then get some more. Luckily, I got just enough and it was perfect, so I don't have to go get more. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and just do a straight stitch down the edge. Because I want the full length of the dress, I'm going to sew it right at the very edge and using my presser foot as a guide. Make sure to have a brand new needle that is nice and sharp. This way, if it gets snagged on the crinoline, it does not get dull. I had a little bit weird hemline when it came down to sewing it all together, so what I'm going to do is go back and cut off this extra salvage edge. Now that the hem is completely done, I'm going to go back and clean it up. I'm going to fold the crinoline over onto the wrong side and sew down the bottom part first. I want the bottom part to be a very nice clean edge and very pretty versus adding in a lining. So I'm just going to do a nice quick stitch there, and then I'm going to go back and sew down the top part of the crinoline. I'm going to do this by using a really long string and needle. Make sure to completely secure down your crinoline first on a seam line. This way it doesn't move or shift or get snagged on your shoes that you might be wearing. And then we're going to be doing something called a pick stitch. A pick stitch is where it shows very minimal stitches on the front of the garment, but on the back it shows a very long line. So it's kind of like a really small stitch and then an extremely long stitch. I use pick stitching for all my hemlines whenever I have something important to add, such as bias taping or I have to add trim. This is a really good technique that I love using, so I highly recommend learning how to pick stitch evenly and perfectly. Once I completely finished pick stitching around the entire crinoline, my skirt was completely finished. Now that I finished the bottom of the skirt, I'm going to go ahead and finish the sleeves so they don't look like sausage tubes. I went ahead and tried it on, pinned it out, and then I'm pinning it together so I get the exact shape that I want on both sides. There are easier methods than this, but this is how I did it. Now, my sleeves, I wanted to go all the way down to my fingers. I'm going to add a lot of lace onto my sleeves, but first I need to figure out the design, so I'm going to play around with what I have available in front of me and make a design out of that. Once I'm happy, I'm going to start sewing it down. So with the sleeves, I cut them open, I laid them out, and now I just did a few placements, and I had to cut up a lot of the lace so it would lay nicely. Then I'm going to hand sew it down. I've already hand sewn some of it down so you can see it here. Nice, and there with all of these thank you. with all of these like stitches, it's not going to be all super tacked down because some of it is still on the mesh and you won't notice it. But if I notice it later and it puckers, I'll just go back. So you can see here that it's still lifted up, and I'll just have to hand sew it down. Obviously, I think everyone knows how to hand sew, so I'm just going to tack it down and move on to the next step. I made sure that each sleeve had the same design on both sides. And so now I'm going to go ahead and sew it down using some of the fallen beads and sequins from when I first cut out the lace. I'm going to do this for both sleeves. Now you can see I've fully finished my sleeve. I might go back when I'm done with all these extra little bits here, and I might go in with some of the trim of the lace. I actually added more beads and the scalloped edge. This way when it goes around my hand, it will look nice. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. Hello. And I'm going to sew this together. In this video, I showed you how I finished my skirt, adding the lace, and I'm finishing the sleeves. Now, time for wait for part 3. Just kidding, it's coming out soon. Or go check it out now.